Hi, Craig. Nice to finally meet you and be doing this. Rudy Nickens, and I'm glad to be a part of this project. And I think I've been thinking about the process of the oral history project and what it means to just sort of take the time to reflect on my identity and my life as a gay man and what does it mean and love being a gay man and what the journey has been like for me. Happy to say. So I'm 65 years old. I was born in Washington D.C. I was from a family of very loving and proud people, and raised with nobody thinking about being gay, of course. So that was something I had to figure out on my own, what it meant to live in this identity. Um, I don't think there's a time in my life that I didn't like boys. I don't think there's a time in my life where I don't know it to be true that my affectional and emotional and physical attraction has always been to boys. So I remember a story about I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and we were gathered. The family was gathered together, and we were watching the Ed Sullivan Show, which is what everybody did on Sunday night, was watch the Ed Sullivan Show if there was somebody black on the show. So this one night, we're all at my grandmother's house watching the show, and Smokey Robinson and the Miracles were singing on there. And Smokey came out onto the stage, and I said, "Oh my God, he is so cute," like that. And the whole family just gasped. And then my grandma gently tapped me on the knee and said, "Little boys are not supposed to find men cute." And I said, "Okay, so note to self, don't say that out loud again." That's exactly how that went. It's not that I didn't find him still cute. It's like, okay, they don't want to hear me say that. So I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I was like, I'm a quick study. I learn, I understand, at least at best I could. So not supposed to say that. Can't change how I feel, however. Can't change what I like, but I can keep it to myself for now. So I think there were moments throughout my life where I had to decide with whom it made sense to talk about it, where it wasn't like it wasn't there, but there just weren't a lot of places and spaces where, as a young person, this is the 60s, it's pre-Stonewall, as they say, so there wasn't a public gay liberation movement. It wasn't on TV every day. The images of gay people, when you saw them, were always sick and hard and twisted and unhappy and anguished. There was no joyful images that you saw. It was only the distressed images that anybody ever saw. So I came into myself right around 17. The first time I actually said out loud that I'm gay was I was 17, and I was in my neighborhood, and I was just walking down the street one day, going to mail a letter, and the bus stop was right by my parents' house, by my family house, and it was the end of the line. So sometimes the bus driver would have a rest period there in the evenings before going on to the next run. And so I'm just walking down to the mailbox, and the bus driver says, "You know what time it is?" And so I said, "Yeah," I said the time. And then I was walking, did the mailing, and I said, "Buses have clocks on them. Why did he ask me that?" So when I came back to go home, I said, "You know what time it is. Why did you ask me the time? You must be lonely or something," like that. And so he said, "I just wanted to talk." And I said, "Okay." So he opened the bus door, and I climbed on, and we talked. He said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "Are you gay?" And it was the first time in my life that I said, "Yes, I am." To that bus driver, his name was Warren. I don't remember anything else about him, but he was probably twice my age. And so for weeks, I would go visit him on the bus just every night, or every time I got I just go out. Sometimes I even ride the bus around town with him. And I just had a person to talk to about it. And I'm so glad that I had him. I'm so glad that I had people who I could just talk out loud about my feelings, and who weren't trying to have sex with me, who weren't trying to, coerce me into anything, who just really became a sounding board for me, and that was really great. So that was my senior year in high school, and so one night I found this place. I'd taken my mom to a funeral actually, and I dropped her off, and I was just hanging out, waiting for time to pick her back up. And I saw this park in Northwest DC, Malcolm X Park, and someone had told me that's where those faggots hang out all the time. That's what someone had said to me once, and I was like mildly curious about what that meant. So it was near where I was supposed to waiting for my mom. So I went into this park, and I walked around, and there were men cruising. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but just really checking each other out, and probably doing things too. But it was just like, wow, a little place where all these men, I don't know what their identities were necessarily, but they were all checking each other out in very suggestive ways. And this man came up to me and just started talking to me. And he was so nice, just such a nice man. And he's like, you're new here, huh? I go, I am. It's my first time. And he became my next sort of mentor. And we became friends, and for the rest of my high school year, he took me around, different parties and places where people hung out. And again, his name was Michael, and I was just enjoying it all. And I remember the first time he took me to a bar, a club. It's called the Third World, and I walked into this place, and I thought, it's like, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. This place where men were just jumping around, dancing, and having fun, and just just enjoying themselves. And there were men and women. It was just like mostly black, and just the music was amazing, and the energy was, I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. And so then I saw one of my best friends in there, and his name was Roger. And he said, it's about time you figured it out, right? And so I was like, you didn't tell me I was supposed to be here, because you can't tell nobody they're supposed to be here. You have to figure it out. So it was great. I ran into Roger. We've been friends since we were in kindergarten. And he had come out earlier than me, clearly, and he was in there and knew a lot of people. So he was like, "This is my friend Rudy," and so I had this community instantly, of young black gay men and lesbians, and that was like the spring of '73, and I was only going to be in town another 6 months before I was leaving to come to college. So I was just studying the DC black gay culture. Roger took me to places, and I met, and Michael, the first person who took me to the bar. So I just started developing a community of gay folk, and I'm really happy that I came out in DC, because it was one of the places where there was a really thriving black gay community that was diverse, and there were people who were political, and there were people who were social, and there were people who were partying, and there were people who were, it was, the whole spectrum of everything from, from drag to politics, and even the intersection of drag and politics in some ways, and it was just great, and it was black. It was very, black-centered, gay community, and we didn't say LGBT back then. It was a very black-centered gay community, and I really, really am grateful that that's what I had. So then, after the summer of my coming out, the summer of my discovering a community of gay people, making friends, seeing community activities, then I moved to St. Louis to go to college. And so I remember the first week that I was here, and I was on campus for, freshman orientation for 6 days, and I saw nothing of a gay community. I saw people that I was pretty sure I clocked as gay, but there was no community, no sense of this is, what we do. And even this guy who became one of my best friends, eventually from my college years. I remember I came to come out. I mean, I came flaming. It's like I intended to like fully embrace what it meant to be this young gay man. Like, I was a pretty conservative kid. I was kind of geeky and nerdy. I wore blue and brown all the time, and so I was like, I'm going to St. Louis. Don't nobody know nothing about me. I'm gonna make myself like I've been like out all my life because they don't know no different. So I got a new wardrobe, and just like I came to be obvious, for what that meant at the time, was just about the clothes. And so this one guy looked at me who on campus who as I say became my best friends. But he looked at me some outfit I had on. He said, I could never. And I said, well, yes, you could. Like that. And then he said, I couldn't. I said, you could, and one day you will. Like that. And that's like how it like I remember that conversation was so cool. And then one day I was like, okay, I got to see what's happening in St. Louis. So I got on the Linda Wydown bus, and I just, because it was the bus that came by the campus, I didn't know nothing, but I said, get on the bus. So I got on the bus and went to downtown. And I just walked around downtown because I remember growing up in DC, you could always find some activity in the downtown centers and the department stores. So I don't remember the name of the store, Bluebeard or Blackbeard or something like that was around. And I walked into the store and just wandered around. And I saw this man who was very gay, just like working there. He was a salesperson. And I just went to him. I said, hi, my name is Rudy. I'm new in town. And where do the children hang out? Just like that. And so
that was the thing. That was
yeah,
open.
Yeah, where did the children hang out? He's like, oh, honey, welcome to town. And so where you at? I'm talking about some campus. He's like, all right, I'll come pick you up tonight and we'll go out. So he did. He came and got me, and we went. I think the first place was like, maybe it was called the Onyx Room, and then we went to the Potpourri. I can't remember exactly the order of what bars we went to, but we made the tour of what was in town at the time.
So what was the Onyx Room like at that time?
Well, it was. What was it like? I was just happy to be around gay people, listening to music and dancing and cruising and being just like community. I think the Potpourri was the one in the West End, in the first one in the West End, and it had they spun in there. That's what I remember. The music in there was just amazing, and so was the Onyx Room. But for me, it was just like I just wanted to dance. Honestly, Craig, I just wanted to dance. I wanted to go and just hang out. So I changed my name. Is the other thing. So when I first got to town, I said I'm gonna change my name. So back up a little bit. So the winter before that, I'd gone to my very first Kwanzaa celebration in DC. And I didn't know what Kwanzaa was, but it was beautiful, African traditional holiday stuff. And I went with this woman who was also one of my best childhood friends, and she was all into it. She was my guide through Afrocentrism, in that part of my life. So during the whatever day of Kwanzaa, she said, I have a new name for you. I said, you do? And so she gave me this name. She said, your name will be Atiba Ifoma. And Atiba means understanding, and Ifoma means lasting friend, and the two of them together mean brother, and that is what you are to me, so I give you this name.
Oh.
And so her name was Rabu, and so from that time, from like December 72, when she gave it to me, till fall of 73, nobody called me Atiba but her. But when I got to St. Louis, I was like, I think I want to be that. I think I want to use that name. So I started introducing myself by this name because I didn't have to say I changed my name from Rudy to Atiba. I was like, I'm Atiba. So for years, people didn't know anything other than my name as Atiba. And so I went about just trying to discover the Black gay community in St. Louis. And in my memory, it was both fun and disappointing at the same time. It was fun to meet people, fun to, meet good, loving guys. It was disappointing because it was hidden. It was not an out community. So you could, lots of people that I just loved and liked and enjoyed being with, but there was no interest in having a gay movement or a gay identity or visibility, and that was hard for me because I wanted visibility, I wanted out, I wanted to just come embracing it all. So in my freshman year, was spent just meeting people and being social. My sophomore year, wanting more. I was on campus with a lot of white people who were coming out and having activity, and so I was like, I wanted to learn more, think more, and develop a more political understanding of it. It wasn't a lot that I knew to read. Just then I read all the James Baldwin novels because he was my guy. He was the person that helped me think through being a black gay young person. And then there were some white gay boys on WashU's campus that were talking about community centers and socials movement, and that interests me because I'm a kid who grew up in D.C. in the civil rights movement, and so having a movement, having activism is central to who I am. It's all my whole life, and it was black centered for forever, and it was civil rights focused forever. But my identity as a gay person was also just as important to have civil rights and liberties and be included. And I'm never willing to be discriminated against for any reason. So this is what we have to figure out. So for a while, my focus really became that on, what does it mean to have an identity, to want civil rights for gay people, to work toward that, and it was.
So now, you did mention the difference in the black community as the white community. The white community were they a little bit more liberal and open, and what was the difference?
Well, the white community that I knew were all college students, and the black community that I knew were people who lived throughout the whole metropolitan area. And so there was a lot more freedom on a college campus to just explore everything. And I think I went to a school that didn't have a lot of black students and didn't have a lot of black gay students in particular. So therefore the student movement for LGBT, what we call it, inclusion was pretty much, was a white-led thing. So that's why I don't think that necessarily white people in the world were any more thoughtful, but young people were progressive. That was just what I think. So when you're talking 18 to 20-year-old people who just want to explore stuff, and in the safety of a protected environment like a college world, and you're kind of free to explore stuff
and try to make a change.
Yeah, that's what it's about. I'll never buy that thing that black people are more homophobic than white people, or I just will never accept that as reality. But I do understand that part of coming out required some things that were associated with economic stability and safety, and because the gay community is still and has always been really kind of racially divided and segregated, and we have not stopped practicing discrimination within us even 2021. So the white identity, the white focus of the gay community did make it hard for black people to find a home and a voice and be seen. And from the beginning I always thought, wow, this is great. We are gay people, which means we're in every identity that there is. We're in every economic class, we're in every racial identity, we're in every faith-based tradition. We should be the natural bridges to healing all of it. That was I guess it still is my vision, but I was it just seemed like, why wouldn't we be the ones to unite all these different fronts? We are represented in everything, and yet I didn't quite yet understand the forces of structured disequality at the time, and how that played out and how that got insinuated into our community. So I always fought for it, and I still fight for it. I have a clearer picture of what the fight is about now. But talking 40 years ago, it was a little bit, less clear as to how to build it. So for a while, my life became quite segregated. My political gay life was very white centered, and my social gay life was quite black centered. And my my personal quest to try to meld them was really important to me. And so I say, I don't know how old you are, but I say, as a a person my age, I'm one of the luckiest gay people in the world, because I came of age post Stonewall and pre-AIDS. So I have that decade of the 1970s that was like, oh my God, this is liberation, this is fun, this is social, this is political, this is love, this is community. Like, that's what that whole decade was about for me. It was certainly about about partying and music, and never ever convince me that disco wasn't the most revolutionary thing to ever get created.
Yes.
You will never ever tell me that that's not so. And and we united lots of stuff through who we are. It was colorful, and it was joyful, and it was there were struggles. There were people who had horrible things happen to them because they were gay. The abuses that we learned about, and stories that people told. And I never got beat up. I never got assaulted. I never personally got attacked in that direct physical way. But it doesn't matter if it happened to you directly. Just the presence of that kind of oppression affects all of our lives. Just knowing that it could happen, and it does happen, and the frequency of it is just enough. I think violence and the threats of violence is just enough to scare people out of participation in life. So I was I will admit to both having probably as much fear of oppression as anybody else, and enough rebellion in me that I'm never going to be quiet. So I'm just never going to be quiet. But you still live with it. You still can't act like it's not there. That would be silly. So the 70s for me as a young gay man were about that, building relationships, trying to meld the two pieces of activism and social justice, fun and community. And then early in my young adult life, I got fortunate enough to be a part of a collective of people that opened a restaurant in the city's Central West End. And we did that for 24 and a half years, and it became like one of the centers of gay life for St. Louis. We became the place where people had held their meetings, and held their fundraisers, and held their discussion groups, and had their book clubs. And it was such a resource. The Sunshine Inn, for people who were around, who will live on forever as the place where these things happen. And I'm really proud. And it's one of my sort of most pride moments and things in life, that I got to be at the helm of creating sort of what was the de facto community center for us for a long time. And we had good food, and we were there to make to be a business selling food. But you got food and you got space. That's a natural convening opportunity. So I will tell you that almost every progressive political candidate, arts organization, aid service organization, activists in so many ways, started their offices there, started their fundraisers there, launched their careers from there. And that's part of what part of my legacy is having gotten a chance to witness as well as participate, to hold space for that to happen. And when you hold space for things to happen, you get to learn a lot. So, we did so many things that were that like, I wouldn't like, in what world would I have been able to be a part of a group of lesbians taking a stand against oppression, but having the space to do it. So for a couple years, once a month, the men in my restaurant put on got up early in the morning to cook food for an open forum for lesbians to come and have a dialogue group. It's called the Lesbian Power Breakfast, in fact, it was called. And it was allyship, men doing this. It was creating, making space for women to have their space. We made the food, we stayed out of the way, we came back and cleaned up, and this is all, before we opened for lunch, once a month. I got to do things. I got to like St. Louis Effort for AIDS, food outreach, all of the, probably just about every AIDS service organization in the early days had their either meetings or fundraisers or food storage or something in our facility, because that became like the most important thing in my life for a while. The most important thing in my life. I had, I don't even want to talk about my love life because, there was that.
Can we talk about AIDS for a minute?
Yeah, we will. We certainly will. So, I had, uh, yeah, so I have the joy of having this free, exciting world as a gay man, meeting gay people all over the country. I hadn't left the country yet, but meeting people all over the United States, finding communities, like it was wonderful for a decade, and then usher in the 80s, and it all changed everything for me. So it happened, just seemed like overnight, that this thing that a few gay men were getting sick in San Francisco, New York, a few more here, a few more there, a few more there, and just in like what seemed like just a few months, it went from this odd thing that we didn't know what it was, and then I remember the first name of it was called GRID, because they didn't even know what it was. The first name of the epidemic was called GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency. That was the first title of it. A virus wasn't determined, the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome hadn't been talked about, transmission wasn't understood, just at all. It was just like, we think something's going on that has to do with gay people. It's like, if you think about last year and the ways that Asian people got targeted with the virus, it was the exact same thing in the 80s for gay people. Like, oh, we don't know what it is, but we know it's y'all fault. We don't know what it is, but we know it has something to do with your lifestyle, and it became the whole, everything from fear to judgment to God hates you to families abandoned you to, it was just this nightmare of a thing. So, I remember, black talk radio can be odd. So I used to do these. They used to do I don't remember what the local station was called, but they used to do these questions in the morning, like call-in question. Like, hey, we are posing the question of the day, and then people would call in and respond to it.
Magic 108.
Yeah. So the question, I was at home one morning, and the radio question was, would you work with a person with AIDS on your job? What would you do if a person with AIDS was on your job? And I was just, doing what I was doing with the radio on. And this person said, well, I have to. I mean, it's a lot of people with AIDS at my workplace, and I go in every day. And the DJ said, there's a lot of people with AIDS. He said, where you work? And he said, I work at the Sunshine Inn. And I was like, oh dear God. Oh dear God, one of my employees actually thinks that our restaurant isn't, that everybody in our restaurant has AIDS, or there's a lot of people with AIDS. And that's because there's a lot of people that were gay there, but the association was if you are gay, then you must have AIDS. In fact, remember the signs that said GAY, got AIDS yet? That was a part of the oppression during those days. So the stigma, the fear, the not knowing where it came from, being in a food and beverage service industry where people were afraid to come into your restaurant now because they didn't know if this waiter had this thing that would get on your plate or your fork, and therefore you're going to die. So people in certain industries were like, kind of like the current pandemic, but like just being, people, and there was no information, there was no medicine, there was no science to say how you get it or how you don't get it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, wow, we got to talk about this. We got to think about this, So of course I convened my staff to do, to hold space for them to think about what fears they were carrying. And then I figured I got to learn stuff. So then I went immediately to Red Cross and enrolled in the Understanding AIDS, training that they were doing. It was really, really important to get some scientific information. And so I got certified, as an peer educator in AIDS through the American Red Cross. And then I began to go, we got to teach people, we got to train people. I met this woman, Maxine Birdsong, there, who became clearly one of my closest friends in life, a heterosexual black woman who was also volunteering to help think about ending transmission with AIDS, and the two of us teamed up to really work on that. And Deborah Patterson was the CEO of the Red Cross at the time, and she was really interested in how the transmission of AIDS was happening in Black people, and that she's a Black woman, and that the way that AIDS education was being doled out was very gay-centered and white-centered, and we learned really quickly that you can't talk about a virus without understanding diversity, because what was happening to women was different than what was happening to men. What was happening to Black people was different than what was happening to white people. The virus had different implications in people's bodies than it did, and there weren't enough women or Black people or different identities in the clinical trials. So this epidemic was the first thing in my life that I actually got to witness disparate treatment happen. So AIDS service organizations were being built with amazing love, compassion, and generosity, but falling short of serving everybody. Because if you weren't connected to the white gay community, you weren't going to get served. And so, Black gay people and white gay people weren't connected to each other very well that time. So most of the early ASO, AIDS Service Organizations in the United States, did an incredible job of thinking about the impact of this virus on the white gay community, period. And so I was like, well, this isn't working. So I got on the board of St. Louis Effort for AIDS right in the beginning. And I remember this one day, there was an event where all of the people who were our clients, we tried to do things, to support our clients, right? And they were doing this thing, this is like the mid 80s, and all these hairstylists in town were volunteering their services to give free haircuts to clients, which was a really sweet thing to do. Except not one of these hairstylists knew how to cut Black people's hair. That was like, oh, we don't know what to do with y'all. So that was like one of the moments where like, okay, look, y'all, we are having a neutral policy with disparate impact kind of moment. So that I got busy, as a board member and as an activist trying to understand the intersectionality. And so I started raising the point, we can't talk about defeating this virus if we're not also going to address sexism and racism and classism and homophobia alike. We cannot just single out one particular dimension of people. We got to do this right. So that was my mission. It was my whole mission, was to make equitable allocation of resources for people impacted by HIV and AIDS over the next few years. So then it was 1993 was the year that St. Louis reached the epidemic number that would make it qualify for federal dollars. So, whatever little bits of money we got for AIDS service organizations from the federal government, a couple $100,000 here. When you reach the certain threshold of population that's infected, then you can qualify for the Ryan White dollars, the Title I money. So we reached this epidemic in 1993, and it was, it's easy to remember when it happened. And Freeman Bosley, first Black mayor, had just been elected mayor of St. Louis. It was like in his first month, we had the 100 years flood and the epidemic, number of HIV. So Freeman and I had known each other from our days in college. We were friends, and he knew that I was, an activist in the AIDS community, and he knew he didn't know anything about AIDS at the time. So he called me up and he's like, "Okay, Nickens, I need your help. We got to do this application right with HRSA to be able to qualify to get the money. I don't know how to do it. I don't know the AIDS community. You do. Lead this thing for me, please." So I agreed to co-chair the Title I Planning Council. And it was still, you gotta remember, still back then when everybody was factionalized. So I convene these meetings, and I'm not gonna let, the middle class people dominate the working class people. I'm not gonna let, the men out-talk the women. I'm not gonna let the white people out-talk the Black people. We're gonna do this together. We're gonna address diversity, equity, inclusion in this room right now, or we're not gonna be successful. So I will say, it was. So in the midst of trying to get this application to the federal government, dealing with this disparate community stuff, people were dying. You gotta remember that people were dying through this whole thing. There was a year that there were years where, I remember a year that I went to 103 funerals, for instance. So you gotta admit, in the midst of constant grief and fear and stigma, and we're trying to save lives. So I'm proud with this. My co-chair, her name is Amy. We led this initiative that got twice the funding that we expected, and that was a victory for St. Louis. And it was because our funding formula was included, addressing the inequities in the community as well. And the HRSA folk loved the St. Louis, application. So the mayor's happy, the providers are happy, and most important, the people impacted by HIV are going to get better served than not. I was exhausted, however. I can tell you that was so I'd been on a lot of AIDS service organizations and boards up until then, and then I led the planning council for 2.5 years to get to get that going, and that was like, okay, I can't do it anymore. So that was the sort of place where I said, I'm stepping back. Now I needed to deal with my own grief. I needed to deal with the fatigue. I needed to focus on something else. I just was I don't want to pretend even 30 years later that I've healed from that much loss and grief. It's still hard to I grew up on the street that I grew up. There were 5 gay boys on my street, and I'm the only one that's still alive. In my family I have 3 gay cousins, and I'm the only one that's still alive. I think about there's some reason that I'm still here. Like I feel I don't really feel the survivor guilt that some people think about, but I do feel the obligation to tell their stories, to keep their memories alive. Like I'm not at all sad about being alive. I don't have that piece of it, but I do have the question constantly of what am I supposed to do with this? That saying, I don't remember whose tradition it comes from, so I don't want to mess it up, but it said a person has 2 deaths. The first death happens when you take your last breath. The second death happens when people stop remembering your name. And so I feel some obligation to remember people and to keep people's names alive. So that's part of I think I did a lot around HIV and AIDS. I remember.
And we're grateful.
And I could not have them thank you. I remember like the National Minority AIDS Council was trying to get off the ground in DC, just starting to look at the fact that there was a need to specifically address AIDS in the Black community. And there was this man named Fred Garnett who led one of the, I think it was Whitman Walker Clinic in DC. It was one of the early places that did HIV, and he was a dear friend. And so I asked Fred to come to St. Louis, and we had an event at the Sunshine Inn called AIDS in the Black Community. It was early in the pandemic, and I was worried, I was really worried. Like I wanted Black people to get involved in this, and I wasn't sure that anybody was willing to come here, but I just had to try it. And the place was packed, and people came and they asked their questions and they showed their fear, and Fred was generous. He and this other friend, Arthur Brewer, who was a physician on the NMAX task force or board, they came, they held this beautiful convening to just sort of answer questions to salesmen and invite people to take care of themselves and to be involved. That, I think that is the event that led, was a man there named Virgil Granberry who led him to forming BABA, because it was clear that there needed to be specific strategies employed to address HIV and AIDS in the Black community. And so then, what else didn't I talk about? So, after 25 years of doing a restaurant business, I didn't want to do it anymore. It was time to go, and I really wanted to just explore the intersections of I wanted to do just sort of more diversity work. That was what I feel like my calling had always been anyway. So I learned a lot from being involved in these grassroots part of the community, and then I got to go to work for a civic organization, St. Louis 2004, to lead the diversity initiatives there, and that was really important. important work for, for me to do. So I went from this guy who, who wore an apron all day to a suit all day. I went from, working and but I got to bring my years of grassroots activism and experience into the level to influence the funding community and the level of business community. Like, these issues are important, and let me tell you why. And one of the and that was an intentional decision. So I think it was like right around 1993 or so. There was this one of the many legislative agendas to try to oppress gay people. They have these things every now and then. Somebody will introduce a bill that says, gay people shouldn't do this or have that, or we want to restrict that. So this coalition of folks statewide, this was a statewide thing. This coalition of folks got together to form a resistance and opposition. We were called the Amendment Coalition, and our job was to try to stop this hateful thing from happening in Missouri. And this woman from D.C., Mandy Carter, came from the one of the coalitions in D.C. to help lead us. And so anyway, took a year for our Amendment Coalition to lobby in Jeff City and do petitions and all the kind of things you have to do to stop a hateful bill from happening. And we were successful in defeating the right-wing attempt to restrict gay people's lives. And I remember the day that it went down, we had a meeting in Jeff City of all the folks who had been involved in it. And I was driving back to St. Louis, and it was clear to me that people understood that my perspective mattered, and that nothing would happen in this state that would impact the lives of gay and lesbian people that I wouldn't step up for, or be like, you should check with him about it. He should be, he's someone who should be at the table. So I'd earned that respect and reputation, as a gay activist, and for a long time was one of the only Black voices, in one of the only Black voices, I will just say that, and that was a lonely place to be. But it was fun. It's what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to make sure that I fought for gay people's rights. And I was driving back from Jeff City that day, and I went, okay, that's good. I don't think that the Black community, like the traditional Black activists, know that I also would fight just as hard to end racism as I have fought to end heterosexism and homophobia. So I don't want to just, be known as a gay activist. I want people to know that I'm down for it all. So then I began to focus my attention more directly on joining forces with, organizations that were created to and working to end racism. And and it's like with all of me though. So one of the things that I remember doing was, like, I wrote a newspaper column for the gay newspaper for a while, Gay News Telegraph. So I was, had a monthly column for the Telegraph, and I always made sure that my column in the Telegraph talked about Black gay people, not just very centric. I remember writing this article about Bayard Rustin because people didn't know who he was, and I wanted the gay man who architected the 1963 March on Washington to be known. I wanted it to be known that the leader behind that historic event was a gay man. So I wanted to make sure that I started raising up the voices of our leaders, and I wanted to do it in Black spaces. I wanted to do it in gay spaces, and that's still an important part of who I am. So then when I went to do the civic work, it became my first chance to really practice intersectionality, chance to really talk about, in a more public place, talking about interrupting oppression, period, learning more. I just had more information, as you grow. So, so I didn't do, I'm saying all to say that I wasn't as active in the mainstream of gay liberation for several years, because I was trying to build coalition and take on racism as the central thing. And then I found the space to figure out, okay, now we're going to work on ending racism in the gay community, because that was what I really wanted to do. So we started doing, the series of workshops and sessions out at UMSL for gay activists to look at how race has been used to separate us, as you know, and how as a wedge issue, race is harmful to LGBT liberation. How we have to like take it all on, not just pieces of it. So that became like one of the most satisfying things. Like, yeah, I do get to meld them. And this initiative that you're working on right now, the Missouri Historical Society story exhibition that's coming out in 2025, and I was asked to be a part of the steering committee when it first got announced, because I'm still Rudy Nickens, and people still remember my name, at least some folk do. So so I got asked to go. So I went to the first meeting, the kickoff meeting, and I was really not happy with it. I was like, okay, this is exciting, and I do want this exhibition to happen, but I said in the meeting that it's not going to be helpful to do yet another telling of gay people's history that is centered in the white identity. And that I don't even want to, I know that you'll pick a handful of black people to say, oh, and we'll talk about E-Rise, or we'll talk about Rudy, or we'll talk about, this name or that name. But that's not what I want. I don't want us to do a white story that sprinkles a little diversity in it. If we're not going to do this initiative right, which means equity from the beginning, that we're going to understand the ways in which sexism and racism and classism have impacted our community, such that we do not tell a story that colludes with the same old way that gay people's stories are told. We're gonna have to do this with centering all of us and not some of us. And so Fran, who was the CEO of the History Museum Historical Society, and I had served on a diversity task force for the Regional Arts Commission earlier on that year, and she understood exactly what I was saying when I said it, and she was like, okay, well then will you lead the equity initiative for this committee? And I went, well, of course I will. I don't complain unless I'm willing to do something. So that is what I've been doing for the last probably a year now since this project got started.
Mm-hmm.
Is trying to infuse a value of diversity, equity, inclusion into every aspect, from collection to storytelling to exhibition to fundraising to marketing. And I did a training right away with the museum staff and leaders of the task forces to try to let's make sure we understand, we're speaking common language, that we know what this is about, and now they're doing lots more, which I'm really pleased about. They engage Promo and MTUG and other organizations to help think about diversity, equity, inclusion, which I think is gonna result in a really good story. It's gonna really a good exhibition, because it will not just be another story of why people did this, and I do not want just another one of those kind of events. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So that's where I am today. So now I work full time as a diversity leader, thought leader, and both for the state agency at DOT, and for with a consulting group out of California. It is my heart, it is my passion. It's just, I think, what's what I'm supposed to do. I still work really hard to challenge, to notice my own fears around this work. So I'm an Episcopalian,
Mm-hmm.
and so last year we were in search for the Diocese of Missouri. We were in search for a new bishop, because our bishop was retiring, and so I got asked to serve on the search committee to find a new bishop. And when asked to serve, that's my attitude about most things. So okay, so we start this national search. We engage all of the people in the state who are part of the diocese. It's 42 parishes, and I don't remember how many people. And we do this months-long listening tour and prayerful, listening sessions, and design this job description and task, and put it out there and start seeing what candidates we'll get. And so we got this nice diverse slate of candidates, right? among them was a black gay man, and he applied for the job, and he made it all the way to the finalist level, to the three, top level. And the way the diocese is structured is, the search committee doesn't get to decide. You just get to search and present a slate of people who then will be voted on. So we did our job. We put together this slate. A black gay man, a straight white man, a straight white woman, and we presented that to the diocese, and they did the okay. Well, and the way the church works, the way the Episcopal Church works is that you're voted on by members of the voting delegate. So for us, Missouri, that was like 70 lay and 95 ordained people are the people that get to vote. Mm-hmm. And you have to get the majority of the yeses from both houses on the same ballot to be selected. And so I remember telling my pastor, who we all thought this black gay man was really great. I mean, we just thought he was great. Everybody I talked to thought he was great. And I remember telling my pastor, I said, well, he's not going to win, right? Because nobody in Missouri is going to elect the first black gay man to be a bishop in the worldwide Episcopal Church, right? That's not gonna happen in Missouri. And so it's like, okay, we tried, we made a step forward, it's like Hillary said, we put a little splinters in the glass ceiling, so it's like I'm braced for it. And he wins.
Wow.
And he wins overwhelmingly. I mean, it was like, he was the best candidate, but still the way my fears sat on me were like, it won't happen, right? There's just no way it's going to happen. I remember looking at, I don't know if you saw the documentary that happened recently called The Black Church. And it's a really good documentary. It talked about black churches. It didn't talk about black people in churches that aren't black, however. So not all churches are predominantly black that black people go to. So I was thinking about the Episcopal Church, which wasn't well represented in the documentary, but there's a lot of black people in it. We just aren't a traditional black church. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking, I said, there's no way that Dion Johnson, the first openly black gay immigrant, married to a brown gay immigrant man, is going to be chosen to be Diocese of Missouri bishop. And when it happened, it just took my breath away. I was so shocked that I was like, I cried for about 2 weeks, and then I went like, how'd that happen? Are we really ready? Did that really happen? And one of my friends said, well, we've been working for this for a long time. We've been working at preparing an environment in which things like this can happen. And and that's what's supposed to happen. But part of me just, this is my attitude. I don't know if it's because of, being a person raised in the assassination generation or whatever, but my posture is almost always keep doing the work. Don't worry about if it doesn't happen because you just got to do the work anyway. So I'm braced for disappointment because just in case things don't go well, it doesn't shock you and you don't give up. Okay, I watched so many things go down that didn't happen. I watched so many attempts for black, gay, female liberation happen. There's no reason to stop trying just because it didn't pass this time or didn't work that time. So I'm always prepared for defeat. And when victory happens, I was like, I'm shocked. So that's where I'm trying to consider like something different here. Like maybe I should prepare for victory and see if I would walk differently in the world if I was prepared for victory instead of shocked by victory. So that's just my little aside. But that is my commitment is to make space for us everywhere. I don't want to just do gay life as a separate thing. I want to make sure that our lives as gay people are integrated into everything we do. And there's one more story I forgot to tell you. So, late 80s, early 90s, I don't remember what year exactly, I was in San Francisco and I was in a bookstore and I saw this sign on the wall and it said, National Coalition of Black Gays, as proud of our gayness as we are of our blackness. And I was like, who can say that? It's like, this was like 40 years ago or something. It's like, people aren't saying, you can't put, I was like, it was such a beautiful and contradictory, powerful statement. It's just like, what? So I wrote down the phone number of this organization. They were in DC, and next time I went to DC, I called them up and said, hey, I want to know more. So I went by, visited, met the guy who was the executive director. His name's Gil Gerald, and Gil Gerard, and we talked. It was wonderful, and he said, you're in St. Louis? I go, yeah, I live in St. Louis. He goes, that's great. We've been trying to find a reason to do one of our national conventions in the Midwest, because everything happened in either DC, New York, or California. And he said, would you be our field organizer for a national convention in St. Louis next year? I was like, hell yeah, I would do that. So I was excited. Joyful. Some of our greatest leaders as Black, gay, and lesbian people are going to come, give keynotes, do performances, show up and hold space for politics and liberation and art and poetry. And I'm just blown away that we're going to have this. So, did all the work, and we got the convention center downtown, arranged, all the logistics and stuff, Gil and the staff at the National Coalition of Black, Lesbians, and Gays did, all the heavy lifting. But we were on the ground, St. Louis, doing stuff. And time comes for this event. And I think there were like 600 or 700 people that attended this thing, which was incredible. And there weren't 10 Black people from St. Louis that came. And that was one of those like, damn. That was one of them damn moments, like, damn. If I was saying we're gonna have a party at somebody's house, it would be wall to wall to wall to wall. Or if we're gonna have a ball, or we're gonna have a show at the club, we all there. But if we're gonna do Black gay liberation or Black gay politics, even my best friends are not gonna show up for that, because it was too public, and they didn't. I don't want to make up stories of why they didn't, but they just didn't. Now, the white gay community in St. Louis was all over it. They were like, we got it. So, particularly the white lesbian community, they were the best allies we had for this, for that event. Helped me with everything I needed, with logistics, with housing, with fundraising, like everything on the ground. They were allies. And I remember talking to my close friend, Tansy, who was with me on every step of planning and working on this. And we both sat there at the opening plenary, just brokenhearted because our friends didn't show up. Brokenhearted. And so that became another one of my calling moments, like, okay, this can't happen. We have got to understand that we are not just about partying. We have got to understand that we have to be, if there's going to be liberation for gay people, it's not going to happen without us.
It's not going to just fall out of the sky.
It's not. So,
you have to put in that work.
Yeah. So I wasn't like mad at people. I was sad about it. Like, I never got mad at anybody, but I remember just my heart was heavy with, this is the shape we're in. Okay, this is what it's like, and it's not a judgmental thing. It wasn't, but it was really like, oh wow, they just didn't get, my friends just didn't get what it meant to be there. And I'll relate a similar thing. A few years ago when I couldn't figure out why many of my middle class Black friends wouldn't show up for Ferguson demonstrations. I couldn't figure out why so many of my middle class Black friends won't get their hands dirty, which is what it means, showing up and marching and being in solidarity with the young activists that were doing stuff like. It just was like, this is about all of us. And I'm not willing to let the movement be defined by young people getting arrested. We should be out there with them. We should be out there supporting them. We should be out there listening to what they're saying. And it's still one of those moments like, we don't get to sit on the sidelines when things are happening. Mm-hmm. And so I still struggle with that one, like, a lot, like how to make the message such that everybody knows that when I say diversity, I mean everybody. I'm not talking about somebody, I'm talking about everybody. So there are moments when I still struggle with how to get the message out there.
What would you want your legacy to be, and how would you like to be remembered? Because we know what your goal is. And keeping your name going, and what would you like for that to look like?
Uh, Well, you know, as long as people remember me as a good man, that's enough for me.
But you've done a lot of work, and I've learned a lot of things from you, and I must say I'm very humbled to be sitting here with you because I had no idea who I had invited to be a part of this, and I am so. I mean, I'm sitting here really in tears, just in awe of you, and I appreciate you and everything that you have done. So, what would you? Why is this again? Why is this important that these stories are told, and particularly our story?
Yeah, well, that's the easy part. That this is our tradition. Storytelling is a part of our tradition, right? This is when we weren't even allowed to read or write, we told stories. That there's something that is so African about the tradition of being the keepers of the griots and telling the stories from our perspective in our words and our voices is just who we are. And so I will always value this way of teaching, this modality of learning, and whether it's done with music or with just there's so many ways to communicate, and so this is important to me. And the thing about legacy, Craig, is that part of what I have wanted to be is I've never been for the limelight, right? I worked hard. I have done a lot. I don't not know what my contribution to our community has been. I'm very clear of how many things I've done, and I told you some of them that I can remember today, and there's more. So I don't need validation from anybody else that I have done my part, because I know I have done my part. I just want everything to go well for people. I want us to have good lives. I want liberation. I want inclusion. I want justice. It's not about remembering Rudy Nickens' name so much to me. And if I'll tell my story as a way of offering myself, but it's really not. I'm not trying to. I don't go for fame here.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, again, I want to say thank you. I want to come around and give you a good handshake and a hug.
Well, thanks for doing this.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
You are welcome.